Living in Appalachia is rough. We deal with violence, gun violence, assault, sexual assault, and rape. And these are things that may be talked about within our podcast. And we just want to let you know, viewer and listener discretion is advised. We live in some of the oldest mountains in the world.
Stolen land, stolen again to create the extraction state.
We are real people talking about real things in a real way.
This is Appalachian Livin.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
You've had a busy couple weeks.
We have, and we've been trying to get together and try to finish what we started. And life is crazy these days, and I think everybody's that way right now. So,
and it's spring. It's really hard to stay focused.
we have been mugging, morels, molly moochers. What else? What else they called? Landfish,
woodfish.
Yep, we found. I went with your sister, and we found a little handful, and I put a little video on our account, on our TikTok and all of our social media accounts. So,
now that you have been out with us, you understand why we get the fever every year about the beginning of May, or not May, March. We're like, it's almost time.
Yes, it feels really good outside, and I've been trying to do better in this podcast in my whole organization of my mind. And I tried to be prepared today, and I'm really not prepared. We're not. I have so many things in my mind that I want to talk about, and I need to have a little list, and I don't.
That's okay.
I don't.
We're gonna ad-lib it today.
We are, and I know you're gonna steer me into a direction of where we're gonna talk. So, I just first of all, what did we do last time? When was the last time we were here?
So I think we did the first part of the trip.
And we need to talk about the second part of the trip.
We need to talk about day 2. And I think the reason we've been hesitant is because it was emotional.
That second day was really about me and you.
Mm-hmm.
It was about your personal story and my personal story. And then we all, after that, we kind of went to your house and decompressed and just kind of hung out and camped out.
Right.
And then everybody went home the next day. So I've been, and I put a piece of my story out there, but the whole story of how everything came about, I didn't, I just put the video of the fact of how my grandfather died in the coal mines. I always knew he got crushed, but I found out that weekend exactly how he died, and it was kind of crazy to see those words, and there was a drawing to go with it, and the way I found it. Do you want to discuss
I'll
that?
set up how it happened. So this is the first evening we were with the group, and we were driving into Charleston to get dinner that night. And we had, as far as I know, one van of folks with us, and then in my vehicle we had me and you and Nikki and Tomas, who are married, and Phil, who is an organizer from Baltimore. And on the way to dinner, which was probably a 15-20 minute drive into Charleston, they were talking about movement music and music that inspires people to action. And You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive is a song that I remember from when I was young, but I didn't hear it until we did the podcast, or did the class presentation with Tomas and his students. And that was a song that Tom said you all should listen to. And on the way home that night, I told you I listened to it 6 or 7 times on the way home.
And Tomas was in the car.
And so Tomas was in the car.
And his wife.
And we both looked at each other and we were like, you need to hear You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive, because it summarizes being in a coal environment, in a coal mining environment, very concisely over generations, right? It kind of, in a few verses, captures life in the coal fields. And so we started playing it, and it's a very kind of mournful song. So the car was quiet, and you had a moment to dig into your phone for a few minutes and catch up on your messages, and you saw something that caused you to react, but you didn't go on in that moment. Maybe another minute or two passed, and I looked over, and your face was wet. Tears were just streaming down your face, and I immediately turned the song off and was like, what is wrong? And that's when you said you couldn't believe what was happening in that moment.
I didn't want to ruin the song, for one. Two, how do you react to that? And you're around people you don't even know besides you.
So what happened? What caused you to?
So I opened my phone, and the family has a Facebook page, right? So my mom has 13 brothers and sisters. I have damn near 100 and some cousins, probably more than that. And so we're all on a Facebook page, and when it pertains to family, especially like our heritage, our grandparents and stuff like that, we share all the stuff there. So I had already shared, and we've all shared, the newspaper article where he got killed, photos and stuff like that. We all knew that. But one of my cousins was going through one of my aunt's stuff, and she had some old papers that one of the brothers that had already passed. She had some of his stuff, and she was just going through it and found this piece of paper, and turned out to be the accident report of when my grandfather died. So
what year did he die?
It was January 11th, 1967. 1/11/67. And it was in Stevenson, is what I always said. They lived it was near Mullins, and that's where we were going to go through Mullins the next day to go to your house. And it was one of the stops. We were like, there's a miners memorial, and it just so happened to be it was the 15th anniversary of
Upper Big Branch
of UBB explosion,
the mine disaster. Yeah.
And it was very surreal in that moment. And honestly, I didn't really know what to think.
And he was a miner in Kentucky.
He came from Kentucky.
Or he came from Kentucky. So the song "You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive" is about Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
Coal mining.
And as I traced some of my heritage back, and it wasn't his side of the family, it was my grandmother's side of the family. She also came from Kentucky. Well, her family did. And they were intricate in developing Martin County. So, my roots run pretty deep. And there's a plaque of my ancestor. So
he's recognized on the Miners Memorial. You all
he is
or paid to have his name placed
right
there.
Yes. So during that, it was a Facebook post within a closed group, and my brother said, I paid to have his name put on that memorial. And I said, well, I'm going there tomorrow. I'm gonna make sure. I wasn't sure that he had put his name, he had already paid to do it. We had talked about it, but I didn't know he had already done it. And so it was just perfect for me to be able to, one, find his name, and two, tell the story to these people that understood where I was coming from. We had already kind of bonded the day before, and you told your story, and it just, the way it happened, seemed like it was just meant to be.
It's almost like stepping stones fell in place in front of us as we were walking along. That's how I describe it. In my mind, it almost feels like the path came to us as we walked it that weekend, and particularly that day. Mm-hmm. We did start out at the Holly Grove Cemetery, which is a memorial to miners who marched in the mine wars down Paint Creek and Cabin Creek. that was one of the areas where the miners camped out while they were striking. And we tell the story in the videos about them digging subterranean trenches, and as evidenced by the sign outside, the memorial sign that says, the Bull Moose Special, which was a machine gun mounted on a railroad car. So it could roll through and just fire, thousands of rounds of bullets out into this campground where these striking miners were marching.
First drive-by.
Right, it's a first drive-by, exactly. And so only one person died in that massacre when they tried to kill all these men, and that's because they dug pits in the ground under their tents for that very reason. So if somebody came through and just tried to shoot through the tents, they would miss. But that is also the place where Mother Jones addressed a group of miners. She addressed many groups of miners while they were organizing up and down Paint Creek and Cabin Creek. And again, we can refer you to Mine Wars History podcast. We can refer you to the museum. We'll just go down to the museum one day in Mingo County and really dig in with those folks on a podcast, because it's so interesting and so rich. And Mother Jones is just such an inspirational historical figure. But there's an energy there, and it's very hallowed and sacred ground. You can tell that a lot of prayer happened there. You can tell that a lot of anguish happened there.
Raw emotion,
right? Yeah. Almost like the ground holds the memory.
Yeah, it does.
And so you feel that energy there. And when you talk about oppression of the miners, that's when we really dug into why were they organizing? Why were they striking? Because they were treated worse than animals, literally. And the video of us that day goes into that a little bit more. All right, so to give you some perspective, we're on this side of the interstate now. And this was a very strategic location, all right? If you look around, I was just describing the geography here. It's down in the bottom, which means you can have lookouts at different high points, seeing who's coming in on either side, right? They're not going to come this way, they're going to come on the low side. So this was a strategic place. Mother Jones addressed the marching miners here when they were camped here. And I could conceive that she would have stood somewhere up here and they were down in the valley. That's where they were camped, right? It was down in the valley. And this is the place, the sign is out by the road, and we can take a picture of it if you want, but this is the place where they put the Bull Moose Special machine gun on the train and drove it past the campground and fired into the campground, trying to kill the marching miners and the miners that were striking to get their needs met.
That Bull Moose Special killed?
By all accounts, only one person died that night. And the reason that is, and if you ever...
Military opened fire.
No, this was the sheriffs.
Okay, this was
these were the sheriffs. Now, Don Chafin, the sheriff Chafin, never claimed that he never told them to do it. But when you mount a machine gun on a rail car, somebody's going to know, right? Like during a mine strike that has the entire state shut down, basically, right? And there are campgrounds of thousands of men, somebody knows what's going on. They killed one man because the campers knew that they would try to hurt them, so they dug pits into the ground and slept in the pits under the tents. And the tents had bullet holes about a foot off the ground. So had they been on a lift or sleeping not subterranean, they would have been killed.
Wow.
So I really encourage you to look into the things that Mother Jones said, because I have been carrying this book around with me, and every time I'm feeling a little like, what are we going to do next? I'll open it up and there's some gem, right? But when she stood here and looked down on these miners and spoke her words of magic to them, to encourage them to keep going.
What year was this?
This would have been 1920, 1920, because the 21 was when things really kicked off. And essentially tens of thousands of miners gathered. And to be clear, it wasn't about wages, all right? They didn't want more money. That was actually the last demand on their entire list. Number one was it was basically human rights, right? Because in the mines, in the deep mines, there were places where you had to navigate dangerous things, and mules. They didn't have mechanized carts back then, right? Mules were what were moving this coal in and out of these shafts in these mines. And you got out of the way for the mule, even if it meant risking your life, because if they had to get another mule, they had to pay for it. But there were men outside who would come in and take your job. So you weren't treated better than a mule in those situations. So their first demand was a human rights demand. Then it went down, they talked about how their community is treated. They talked about being able to earn money that isn't only able to be spent in one place, because that's enslavement, right? If you do a job for me and I give you a piece of paper that you can only spend with me, that's not freedom. That's not commerce, right? Those were their demands. And when the coal companies basically said, yeah, fuck off, that's when they started striking, started gathering, started marching. And Mother Jones, who had she was a Scottish immigrant. She came here in the mid 1800s. Her entire family died from, I believe it was the Spanish flu, one of the influenza epidemics that went through. All of her children and her husband died within a matter of a couple weeks. She had nothing. She went to Chicago and was a seamstress in the factories that caught fire during the Great Chicago Fire in 1961, and she lost everything again. She turned her energy and her attention to child labor first, because there were 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds working in factories and mills during the early industrial days in this country. She marched a ton of children from, where was it, Lindsay? I forget what city, to Philadelphia to Manhattan. I'm so glad I have another union expert here. Union people know their Mother Jones.
He's been giving us so many history lessons.
They have the monument in Philadelphia. She gathered these children and marched them from Philadelphia to Manhattan.
Have you guys learned about Mother Jones in history classes?
Isn't this amazing? You haven't learned about this person?
Eliminated from U.S. history.
But Mother Jones was irreverent. She was fierce. I won't say she was fearless. I think she was very courageous. But Lindsay, and I were talking about this, and she said she had nothing to lose. She had absolutely nothing to lose. Her entire family was gone. Her livelihood had been taken from her, and she still had something to say about it, right? So she directed her energy toward, at first, the children, the child labor, and then the miners. She showed up all over the country for miners. All over the country. Anywhere there was a mine or people struggling with labor issues, she would show up and speak and support you. And she was a key figure in agitating. You've heard me say I've moved from organizing to agitating, right? She was a key figure in saying the words that needed to be said in that moment. I want to tell you a little story, give you an idea. This 80-year-old woman, when she was down here, 80 years old, gray hair, pin curls, little hat, long silk black dress, and a white lace collar. We read a story last night when she went to talk on Cayford. She went to address the miners on Cayford, and they had Baldwin Felts thugs following her.
Tell them what Baldwin Felts are.
So Baldwin Felts were the hired armed guards. I need my...
Pretty rural place.
Yeah.
All right, so
I just want to make, she did go everywhere.
She went everywhere.
She was honored for that, and some of her speeches are some of the most articulate.
Yeah.
She cut to the chase. I'm telling you, grab that book I have and just thumb through it, and any of the quotes you see in there are amazing. So the story we read was she was going up to speak to the miners on Cayford, and the Baldwin Felts thugs, these were...
On Cayford,
They marched off of Cayford down Cabin Creek.
Wow.
Yes ma'am.
Wow.
So Baldwin Felts were hired gun thugs, basically, to keep people in line. They were the security.
Like militias,
yeah,
right?
they were like private security guys who had all the authority to... The image I have in my mind as I'm speaking this is the Whipple Store Company store had a staircase on the front that was like an Aztec staircase. It was very narrow and it was hard to navigate, and it was built like that on purpose. And it was so that if you gave them mouth or gave them trouble, they could hit you and you'd roll down it. You couldn't. It was like it was a spectacle if they pushed you down the steps, because it was this long stairwell, right? So there were, even in those thugs were the people who stood there with guns outside the company store. They defended the coal barons. They were spying on people to make sure they weren't organizing. If a if a Baldwin Felts security guard saw two women speaking over the fence while they were hanging laundry outside, he would tell them to stop and interrupt them and try to intimidate. They were the armed thugs of the coal industry, all right? So here Mother Jones goes to take a train up to Cayford to speak to the miners. The first transition she had like 6 or 7 Baldwin Felts thugs behind her. The next one, she had Baldwin Felts thugs and militia, U.S. militia behind her, following her. So she accidentally, absentmindedly got off the train at the wrong stop at Kmore, and the whole people following her, these 30 people followed her off the train, and she gets down in the creek and crosses the creek and jumps up on the other side, and this whole group of people cross the creek, and this little old lady is leading this parade, making a spectacle, and she'd called the media ahead of time. So the media is documenting how this little old lady is leading these thugs through the mud they follow her everywhere she goes. So she just takes, through the creek and up over the hill. It was genius. And they were following her because they were waiting for her to say something that they could arrest her for, right? And they'd listen to what she said, and she'd go up there and say, "Don't fight this." The way she articulated her direction to the miners made it almost impossible to accuse her of something, right? She was a masterful orator. She knew exactly what to say to the crowd, right? To inspire and motivate them. She rode the vibe, and she read the room, and she was genius at it. And there are very few people in this part of the country who grew up here who don't know the name Mother Jones. They might not know the whole history, but they've heard the name Mother Jones. So Mother Jones inspired these men here. She stood here and talked to them about the importance of what they were doing, the things that all of us benefit from today that they were marching for, human rights and labor in this country. So I'm leaving out a lot of details because it's so in-depth, right? It's so rich and thick. When they ended up finally deciding to, that's what I wanted to say. One thing that people often don't realize about these marching miners and these mine wars, a lot of the men who were leading these miners had gone to World War I and fought in Europe and had survived and come back. They were military trained, snipers, lieutenants. They had military training, so they were able to militarize these marching miners. They had snipers that were sniping the coal company snipers that were set up to get them along the trail as they marched. These were savvy men who knew what they were doing, and they moved 20,000 miners out of these hills toward Logan.
Wow.
And they were going to go.
Is that why the United Mine Worker Museum is located in Logan?
Well, yes, probably, yeah.
The Mine Wars.
Because that's where they were.
Right.
That's in Matewan. Are you thinking of the Mine Wars Museum?
Yeah.
That's in Matewan. So that's where a lot of the awful things that happened to spark the wars. Mm-hmm. Like Matewan's kind of watch the movie. Bloody Mingo, right. So once these about 20,000 miners who identified themselves with red bandanas around their necks, coining the term the Redneck Army. That's where the term redneck comes from. The Redneck Army wasn't because we worked outside and our necks were red. It was because these men, and it was to help identify them in the woods and be able to know who you were dealing with. They had red bandanas, like a uniform, right? So they start marching toward Logan. The sheriffs can't stop them. The local militia can't stop them. The governor called the president, and the president had to call in the Air National Guard to bomb them, to drop bombs from the air on groups of people marching here on Blair Mountain. They stopped, the march stopped, but by then the entire country was looking at what was happening. And this was in days when news moved slow. You had wires, right? Well, a wire would get the news to the town, but nobody in town was there looking at it for a couple days, right? So this had gone on for years now. What was happening in these hills had gone on for a couple years, so the whole country was looking. And when they called the Air National Guard in, they had to stop. Everybody had to stop, because then we just bombed our own people, right? From that came the negotiations and eventually the United Mine Workers of America. So I'm not going to go any more into depth in that history, but what I want you to take from this is that there's a new show on called Matlock, and it's kind of a play on the old Matlock lawyer show, but the main character, Kathy Bates, works her way into this law firm and up to the boardroom during a board meeting, past security and everything. And they said, "How did you get in here?" And she said, "Something funny happens when you get older. You become invisible." Part of Mother Jones's brilliance was using her persona as a little old lady, right? Some armed thug can't knock a little old lady down who's standing there in a silk dress. So they had to handle her with kid gloves, right? Like she was something that they didn't know what to do with her. Isn't that fucking awesome? Doesn't that inspire you? Do you not take a little fire from that? I do. And I feel like, I came here, the first time I came here, I was with Wes Harris, who is an amazing historian. He does a mobile mine wars history, and he'll unpack his back of his truck, and he has script and all these things that you can look at from these times. But I came here with him first. And I feel like it was, that's why I said it looks very different to me than it used to, but I feel like we were up there somewhere, and I was drawn to a particular spot and just went there and stood, and had just started with keepers. And he basically told me I was standing where Mother Jones had stood. And I can't find that spot now because I don't recognize it, but when he said that to me, remember I told you when I heard the words mountaintop removal for the first time, I had that visceral reaction? Well, when he said that to me, I had that same reaction. I felt so connected to it somehow. And so, learn as much as you can about Mother Jones. There's nothing you can learn about her that won't be something you use. With the quote I read the other night, she has a quote that I sent to Lindsay about guns, violence, and morphia. In Appalachia, we use our guns for the violence, but when it all dies down, we go back to our morphia. Addiction was an issue 100 years ago here. Wow. She didn't say alcohol because it was prohibition. She said morphia, which is morphine. My great-grandmother had opium poppies growing in her front yard. Before the war on drugs and they, did away with all the opium poppies, my grandmother had a patch of poppies in her yard that produced opium that she would go out and cut and use the opium milk for medicine. Wow. That's the morphia. You could abuse it, but it was medicine. When I read that, knowing what we know about addiction in Appalachia and struggles and labor struggles and strife, again, we're having the same conversations 100 years later. Slightly different words. But that's what oppression, depression, suppression, mono-economies, propaganda, that's what those things lead to. So here we are. We're here again. You're here for the second round of the mine wars.
Mainly the miners.
Many of these graves, if you look, they probably died around that time. Lindsay and I looked at a lot of the dates and tried to maybe identify some things we could look at. It's kind of hit or miss. Obviously, for 100 years, folks have been burying their loved ones up here, right? So there are a lot of graves that are tied to local folks. That's what I think the fences are, to identify, individual family cemeteries or whatever. But this is a sacred place for us. This is a place where, imagine the energy of that night when that Bull Moose Special came through with that machine gun. Imagine that feeling of what was in this valley that night. Yeah, Dylan?
Where is that rail line?
It was down along the creek. I don't know if there's still an active rail line now, because a lot of the old rail lines have been, You have a real
When we
wanna say
turned
a few
in
words
off
of-
the creek,
yeah.
there was a historic marker for the bull.
moose special, yeah.
Why
And the
do
rail
you-
line is right there.
Right there by the creek, yeah.
Rail lines always went right next to the creek.
Right. That's it's usually common. Now, like I said, I don't know that they still use it. I don't know if this is still an active.
I didn't know if it was still there, that the lines were there.
Yeah, they're still there.
Do you want to talk about why you guys have such respect for Mother Jones?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I would just say, I think I could sum it up with,
Can I mic you real quick?
no.
Oh, okay.
Just this one thing. She was identified as the most dangerous woman in the country.
Wow.
Woohoo! Okay, so let me talk about Blair Mountain for just a second, because they actually got a permit to mountaintop remove Blair Mountain. You want to talk about to every labor union in the country?
Race history.
They started it. They started that mine on Blair Mountain, and people in this state fought like hell for years to get that set up as a national monument. They stopped.
People coming together that are not normally on the same.
Absolutely,
side to
right?
Come together for that.
Because that's every person in this country is affected by what happened on Blair Mountain every single day of their lives. That's how important it is, right? You can't stress how important this place is. They mined part of it. They took part of that mountain. They got them stopped before they took it all. And they did turn part of it into a national monument. You know what they did with the rest of it? They turned it into a fucking airstrip.
An air?
An airstrip, an Air National Guard airstrip, where you can fly planes.
How ironic.
It was intentional. It was absolutely intentional.
That's a slap. That's a backhanded
I'm
slap.
shaking. It pisses me off so bad. But that mountain still is standing. And there is still a preservation there that preserves our history and demonstrates it. But that's what we're dealing with. They want us gone. They want to erase that. They want the world to believe. When the water crisis happened in 2014, I had been talking about the myth of the inbred hillbilly for a couple years when the water crisis happened. You know what? It was like CSI or one of the next storylines within that week was in Appalachia with a bunch of dumb backward hillbillies. And my sister called me and she said, I don't usually notice stuff like this, but I think it's interesting that we haven't seen anything about the dumb hillbillies in a while until 300,000 of them got poisoned. So we have to remind the entire country how dumb they are, so when they start bitching, don't listen to them.
Right.
Because they're inbred, they're backwoods, they're too dumb to know what's going on, and they don't really matter. That's what my sister took from a drama that aired the same week as the water crisis. And she's not the tinfoil hat type. She's quite the opposite, actually. So it's part of the narrative in this country about who we are in this place. And they don't want you to know the truth. You've heard me say it a couple times. Now that you know the story, we're the descendants of those people they bombed. Those are our ancestors.
My family is from Mingo, Logan County.
That's right.
Yep.
That still lives in us. They didn't kill them. They didn't kill all of them. They're trying. They're trying to poison us and run us off and make it as uninhabitable as possible for us.
Little do they know.
That we know Nikki Fabricant and all these cool people she brings with us. And
I do want to
Cockroaches.
say
They
that,
go
like,
nowhere.
these tropes circulate in poor communities in Baltimore too. And like over the years as we've been doing this, I think a lot of Black organizers have paid attention to the ways in which, wow, you guys are made expendable, poor white folks, through these tropes of like inbred hillbilly, and they blame poverty on us, right?
Yeah.
And so that individual, and you guys have talked about this, all three of our youth organizers, right? The ways in which, like, in Curtis Bay, people blame each other, right? It's a dumping ground because you throw garbage there, right? Not seeing those larger systemic issues. And so the threatening thing is that those folks align with Appalachians, right? Which happened in the 60s, and we've been learning about some of that. The Rainbow Coalition, that was Black Panther Party folks, that was Latinx organizers, Young Lords, right? Yeah. And that was Appalachians, the Highlander School, where all these folks come together and learn together. That is threatening.
And so what do? They kill them, and they break them up, and they accuse them of crimes they didn't do, and they lock them up, and they incarcerate them, and they take all that power and spread it out and co-opt it. They offer people like me jobs. More money than I can even imagine to shut up.
Your mouth up, right?
Their team.
To shut up and go somewhere else and work for them.
One thing about the bombing, they practiced, if you want, 3 months, what was it, May of that year, before they bombed here, Tulsa.
I didn't know that.
Tulsa massacre.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's right.
Bombed Tulsa.
That's right.
And people know about the Tulsa massacre.
Can you get
Yeah.
mic'd? Will you give him his mic?
Yep.
Is that okay? Because
I can just hold it.
Let me put it right here. It's a super great mic.
May 1921, and then September here.
Wow. Tulsa was what month?
Go ahead.
May.
So I grew up in Oklahoma City, about an hour from Tulsa. Throughout all of my schooling, I even took an Oklahoma history class, and I never once learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre. Wow. Not a single time until I was like 20. Wow. I never knew about it. Like, hundreds of people were murdered just for being black and successful. We get a common myth that's told in Oklahoma is that like there's like one place that's been bombed ever, and it's like because like a pilot like was like doing a training exercise and like saw like street light and accidentally bombed it during World War II while training.
So they lied about them test bombing.
Right.
During the Tulsa Race Massacre, it wasn't just people rioting. They were flying planes overhead and dropping firebombs out of the planes onto these black people's neighborhoods in the city.
And part of that is that what you referred to is that there were returning soldiers from World War I in the community. And this happened over and over again in that same time period through American cities. Black soldiers come back, and this time it isn't just a pogrom. This time there's resistance. This time there's organized defending of those communities, and then in some cases it gets escalated.
Right.
Thank you for that context. That's helpful.
And that was just months before, you're saying? Wow. I would have never.
Well, September here and May there.
Right.
So there was a concerted effort to stop any power building within the communities. And I loved how you phrased that. They were bombed because they were black and successful. That was the reason. Damn.
Is that where
You got to incorporate that into your.
Yes, that was Black Wall Street. Yeah.
Black Wall Street, okay.
Although there were several, but that's the main one that's used.
Yeah. But yeah, growing up, not a single time was that ever mentioned.
Wow.
Even in my Oklahoma history class did I hear about the Tulsa Race Massacre.
We had similar situations in a lot of cities. Washington, D.C. was one, where the same thing, where there was, wasn't no bombing there, but there was this time a resistance on the part of the community that was being attacked. But
How do you feel about what you just heard?
go for it?
Come on, Ariel.
We know you
I
don't
just
like
feel like really pissed. I'm really sad, really mad about what happened to these people, to these young people and old people that had like a future. And when Zach was talking about the I felt really mad because even though like they're colored people, they still had like a living, they had jobs, they had stuff to do, and they were really happy, but people had to bomb because they were colored and they were racist and they were ignorant and mean and just really rude to those kind of people. I mean, I do get bullied because of my skin at my school, which is really not good, because when I go to my school, there's some racist people who are just so mean and to colored people, and I feel like as a person, I feel really sad for those people that have died and the people who didn't deserve to die.
So to start there and kind of remember what happened in these mountains, and then to get on an interstate and drive maybe 20 miles, not even 20 miles. I don't know. The turnpike is so difficult to gauge.
It was about an hour. It's about an hour. In West Virginia time, in West Virginia travel, we travel about an hour. Well,
to PAX is probably about 40 minutes, but yeah.
Oh, right, to PAX.
To PAX. The convoy, we had multiple vehicles and we were traveling
all the
along.
Stops.
Yeah.
I can't remember all the stops. So,
I burned it into my brain for months beforehand. So in PAX, we stopped beside the interstate because you can see the mine from the interstate. And the students from Baltimore who had worked on the mapping project had actually identified that as one of the mines that was bringing the coal into the city, that was causing the issues up there. So to connect those dots in a very tangible way was important. We have the footage. It's Kentucky, it's Tennessee, and it's Virginia and West Virginia. North Carolina. We've heard Max talk about the massive flow around the Ashland area was exacerbated by this type of mining in those areas. So anywhere there is coal, and this is permitted, it's happening, right? There was also a statistic that every day in Appalachia, the equivalent of the bomb from Hiroshima is what is detonated to blow these mountains apart. So every day that much explosion is happening in these mountains. The water table is being shaken and cracked, right? The wells being sunk, the impacts that has long term make it uninhabitable. You saw those big chunks of rock flying off that flew off of the mine at Cayford. That happens everywhere, right? Those giant chunks of rock come off of these explosions when they blow them off the mountains. That impacts things.
So PAX is still an active strip mine?
Absolutely. They are currently mining that. It won't be inactive until it looks like Cayford.
Right.
Greened up with some trees on it.
Yeah, now some backstory on that footage. I was a hot mess at that point. I completely lost the mic for my phone, and but it was pretty important that whatever footage was taken there at PAX was done by aerial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, this is your story. This is you. Because she is the one that is looking at the coal piled up in front of her house. She's looking at it in the mountain of where it's coming from. And when you think about it, it's pretty powerful. And I feel like I say these things around here, and people just, people are, what's the word I'm thinking of?
There's a tension because we love our coal miners and we love work. We are the workingest people on the planet. West Virginians work harder than anybody because we've had to.
Yeah.
And we love our miners and we love our work ethic. And it's hard to reconcile that with not having an economy that supports people who love to work.
Right.
The economy around coal is not one that you leave from healthy, or there's a place, there's a way to grow and to move. It's a hard living to make.
It is.
Any type of it, whether you're mining copper or mining diamonds or mining coal, mining is hard work.
Yeah.
And, we've created this podcast to poke at some of these tender spots within our community and to open up and look in behind doors and curtains where people aren't looking. We know it's there and we know these spots hurt. But let's talk about that feeling inside when I want to be like, no, I'm okay with the coal mines because they support my community, but I also am not okay with the repercussions of having them here.
Yeah.
That's a totally legitimate statement.
Right.
And that's not anti-coal, that's not anti-mining.
Right.
That's a reality.
And it's turned into, if you say anything, then you're anti-coal.
Right.
It's like, I'm not that.
Right.
I'm not that. I'm not anti-coal. I am anti-poison. I'm anti-death. I'm anti-slow death.
I'm anti-mono economy.
You
Can
know,
I have more things to do besides that?
Please give me, and it's not like I'm saying anything that people are disagreeing with when I say, well, you know, your only choice is the coal mine or the military, or move away. But it just, some of the comments, and as Max said, he's like, don't be reading no comments, you know. But, you know, sometimes I feel like we need to address some people.
Well, I just want to say I am not I'm the most non-confrontational lawyer you'll ever meet in your life. Like I'm good at arguing. Like I say, you can ask both of my ex-husbands. I'm an excellent arguer. I'm good at what I do, but I don't like confrontation. Like in the heat of the moment, I'm not a, you know, agitator in that sense. But I'm also no longer afraid to step into that space.
Right.
And what I've found by looking at you stepping into that space is we find our humanity. Mm. You know, I have watched folks come at us in the comments and come at what we've said, and to the folks who have called me a wealthy out-of-towner who's never had anything to do with a coal miner. I'm so glad I put off that image, because
I really wanted to put your story out there as the rebuttal to that one.
Yeah, I don't do this for money or for riches. I make a living. I support myself. I pay my bills and my student loan debt, which I still have a ton of. But I choose to serve a community in southern West Virginia as a lawyer. And as a result, I've taken a huge pay cut. There isn't a market here for somebody like me to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, doing house calls for people who need medical powers of attorney and wills. I serve my community as an attorney here. I could jump ship and go anywhere and make a hell of a lot more money. It's not about money for me. I have wealth beyond numbers on a screen. You know, I've spent the past 3 weeks in the forest every day. How many people work all year to go spend just a little bit of tiny time in the forest, you know, in the national park? I get it every day. So my wealth, I am wealthy. I am beyond wealthy.
Yeah.
I am far from rich. But I also, I appreciate that people are watching and making those comments, because it gives us a place to clarify. Saying the words bootlicker, putting it out there and saying you're brainwashed and you're a bootlicker if you think that there is no repercussion for going up against the man.
Right.
Have you tried it lately? Let me know what they say.
Well, the last comment that I just saw right before we come on here, it's always on that one video, because you mentioned Massey. Oh God, no, this is absolutely not true. They are such a good company, right?
Trial transcripts from Don Blankenship's trial are what I'm basing the majority of my comments on. People who testified about the conditions, people who swore under oath and told the truth about what was going on there. We haven't forgotten that.
Right.
And so while it may not have been your personal experience, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Exactly. And that's what I think we need to learn, is that just because you're not experiencing something doesn't mean it's not happening somewhere.
That's right.
You know, you could sit on the mountain, the beautiful mountain that you live on, and say, there's nothing happening. West Virginia's beautiful. Look at this. Look at this. It's so beautiful.
And there's no lie in that. It's true.
Right.
And.
Yeah. Oh, but, you know, you could also say, it's so beautiful, and I'm so glad that we have this part of West Virginia to be able to extract and have employment and jobs, you know, and they look at the area that I live in, as a place. Another comment I saw was you need to just pick up and move. Fuck you.
Right.
Let me ask you, where's your mama at? Where's your mom and dad at?
Have you tried to buy a house recently or property anywhere? How do you move? Who wants to live in a toxic environment? You're telling me to move because nobody wants to live here, so you think someone's going to purchase my property when I leave?
Yeah, what am I supposed to do? Oh, sell it to the coal mines so they can have it and you know, kill this beautiful land that if they didn't touch it, then I could eat the fish out of here and the deer and all that. Right now, as it stands, I'm afraid to eat anything that comes out of here. And that's including the vegetables that I grow, but I'm taking a chance. And that's just the chance that I take. What are you going to do?
Right. This reality isn't new, but we're not going to continue to act like it isn't happening, because there is a better, you know, for 25 years, my personal experience, and I know the people around here have been doing it for decades longer than that, but my personal experience for 25 years is, this is what you are, this is what we do, you do not object. And when people try to bring other ideas in, there is a concerted effort to shut them down.
There is.
And as long as there are minerals under the ground and people who own them, there is going to be a drive to extract them. Like, that's just the reality. But there is also the reality that, let's say something internationally happens, like is kind of happening now, that is completely out of the hands of our miners or our mine operators or our mine owners, and it completely changes the economy here. And there's nothing else. There's nothing else to drop into or to go into. There's no factory, there's no fields, there's no nothing.
There's no backup.
So it's a very short-sighted plan. And I'm not, you know, I think it's beautiful when people can come together and disagree, but at the end of that conversation say, hey, by the way, you have black lung. Do you need help getting your benefits, or do you need information? And for someone else to say, no, I've got mine, but, you know, I got a great attorney and here's who it is, and thank you. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah, there have been several people that, you know, we disagree on some things, but we really don't disagree on what's important.
We're not against each other in any way, shape, or form.
No, because, you know, once I explain to them, I'm not against coal miners, trust me. I'm
deeply.
I love one
deeply
more than I love anybody on this planet. Okay? And you can't tell me I don't.
Right.
So it's not that we don't love our coal miners, it's that they deserve better. We deserve better.
Yep.
This land deserves better. And I'm not going to shut up about it. And there's some stuff that's happening locally, and I want to mention it. I'm going to mention it. I'm also going to mention the fact that Richard Altizer is the one that is doing this, and me and him have had our differences. We just have personality clashes, but we're for the same thing. For the most part, you know, we don't want our water to be poisoned.
Right.
You know? And the fact that I have to pick people to be on my side, that they don't want their water to be poisoned, that there are people that is okay with the fact that there is poisonous water coming into our state park. Okay? Y'all need to look at Richard Altizer. His Facebook page. He's got videos. Just watch it, because I'm not going to tell the story. But I do know, because I've seen it myself. I go to the Second Falls and you'll see the orange stuff.
And we know that it's not rhododendrons.
No, they're trying to say that it's the rhododendrons taking up nutrients, whatever. Basically, they're saying that the rhododendrons is shitting red water. I would say if we knew that our state flower was shitting red water, we would know by the year 2025.
Yeah, I've never seen it before.
I haven't either, And so I saw some videos on his Facebook page that I just want people to go to, and I'll try to link it. I know I don't really link stuff like I said I'm going to, because I suck at that.
Well, you can't be great at everything.
No, but I will, if you message me, I will always direct you to whatever I have talked about.
But finding the commonalities is so important, and you don't have to agree on everything.
We don't.
And even if you have words and you have situations, and that's what I've experienced is people have come to me and talked about, the podcast and the pieces that they're seeing. I hope that what's resonating with them is that it's done with loving intent. It's done with a place to create a place for this conversation that doesn't exist.
Right.
And from that, let's look at that tension. I don't like being confrontational. I don't like being screamed at. I don't like being told that what I think is wrong. But I'm 45 years old. I am 45 years old. I am an attorney. I've lived in a lot of places. I've got enough life experience to have some credibility.
Yeah.
And I care deeply for this place. And I care deeply for these people. And it's those of us who are willing to step into those uncomfortable places that create the space for the real warriors to step forth, because creating a space is just creating a space.
I'm not doing really anything.
Nope.
And if people want to be like, oh, you just run your mouth. Yeah, I do.
But the people who are reaching out to us and saying, my grandmother lived on Blair Mountain and I know good stories, and she has good stories. People who are saying, my grandparents were there when that happened. My parents were part of this. That has been so incredibly eye-opening, that so many of these people still exist, and these stories are still here, and in maybe even first-hand accounts in some situations.
And I would love to hear any of them. I know I've said, I'd love to hear it. Reach out to me if you want to tell your story. We can do a Zoom and you can talk to us.
Yep.
If you want to just put that story out there, just let us know and we'll talk to you. We'd love to hear it, because I love hearing those stories, and I want to keep them alive. Right. Really, I want to keep these stories alive, because
it's our history. It's who we are.
It is, and I feel like it's fading, and we're losing it, and people are forgetting who we are. And I don't even remember what video it was. I don't know. I put something. I've been putting a lot on social media, and I can't even remember. But I remember someone said, that makes me want to put my red bandana on. Right. I said, girl, don't ever forget where you are, where you came from, and who you are.
That's right.
Don't, and we're forgetting that. And we are putting a dollar amount on people's lives. And I don't think it's right. And you can come at me about anything, but
you're never going to convince me I'm wrong about that. And I will talk to you all day long about it. I'm not, and I think it's important to say too, we're not trying to convince people one way or another here. No. This is a platform where we want you to come here and we're going to try to tell you all the reasons you should think the way we think.
No.
We are simply saying, we know.
We do.
We know what's going on, and we know the tension that exists within our bodies, because when people talk to me about this, I can see it in their faces. We love our miners. Mm-hmm. We love our miners, and we love our hardworking men and women. We always have. We honor that. But it's okay to say that the thing in the community that's feeding us is also killing us.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say that, because it's true.
And it's okay to say that that's not okay.
That's right. And you may disagree with me and say it's perfectly okay. Like I've told you before, you're never going to say anything to me that makes me feel or believe that it's okay to blow the mountain apart to get the coal.
Yeah.
There's no argument you can ever make. Some people, there's no argument you can ever make to make them feel differently about extraction.
Yeah.
They believe that mineral was put there for us to dig out of the ground. Mm. So that's not what the conversation is. The conversation is, okay, you love to mine coal. Your dad loved to mine coal. Mm. He can't anymore. It's not going to be around forever. Mm-mm. Not everybody here wants to mine coal. Can we have a conversation about those other options for our kids and grandkids? And if this place is too toxic to live, they'll never know its beauty. Mm-mm. They'll never know the streams and the squirrels and the birds and the my sister and I were talking about landmarks in the woods. When you forage, landmarks and trees and rocks are very important to remembering where your patches are. And this ice storm this winter and the big storms that came through Helene, multiple
And the floods.
wind and rain events, changed the forest landscape so much that it's been hard to navigate.
Yeah.
It's not unlike our communities. We know and we're familiar with these places, but when things and factors happen that drastically shift them, a flood in McDowell in Wyoming County,
Changed a lot.
mines going out, going under, big, huge, catastrophic shifts, it changes the landscape. It doesn't quite look the same. But we're resilient and we're hard workers, and all of you who are listening and feel away and take the time to write a comment, thank you.
And please review. Listen, if you love or hate us, could you review us?
Let us know.
That'd be great.
But just to clarify, I'm not wealthy and I'm not from out of town.
No. If our set could tell you anything, we're definitely not wealthy.
No. I mean, I do have a hard-working husband, and we are a 2-income family, and I live a very solid, comfortable, what I would consider upper middle class lifestyle, but we work very hard. We work really. My husband leaves at 4:30 every morning, and I'm up with him. A lot of my work happens before people are even up. But that's how I was raised. Yeah. That's how we were raised.
Me too.
That's what you do.
I'm up too.
I know. You're great on that in the morning. So after PAX, we went to the Mabscott exit, which is where you travel through Leicester to get onto the first part of the Coalfields Expressway. It was really, as far as I know, probably the first part of the Coalfields Expressway that was built and completed, because it was done for like 20 years before they even opened any other part of it. But that's where you kind of drop down into where my family is from, my dad's family.
We went down into Slab Fork, where Bill Withers is from.
Yeah. Bill Withers. Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a couple other ones.
Lean on Me.
Lean on Me. I mean, Bill Withers just had a statue dedicated to him in Raleigh County as a memorial.
The road, I think, is called Bill Withers Highway or something like that. But when you go past Slab Fork and then you take a left.
And gosh, I think the population of Slab Fork's probably, like 15, 12?
I bet it's
20. 25
maybe.
It's a tiny little town.
Yeah, it's just a little road, basically. It's an old coal camp, and that's what we told them. It's like, these houses, they all look the same. You can see where there's one used to be here, but it's an empty lot, and they've kind of built onto this one and put siding on, and this one hasn't had anything done, so you can tell what it used to look like. So we went through that, and then we stopped at the place where your family is from, that I had no idea. I had no idea that this woman that I've known for 10 years, and okay, she hasn't been my bestie but a year yet, but
we're working on it.
But I still didn't know that your family was from, and I keep wanting to call it Lashmeet, and it's not Lashmeet. It's Hotchkiss. And then I'll go to Matoka. I'm like, it's not Matoka.
It's not Matoka.
It's Hotchkiss, right? And so anybody from Pineville, Mullins, Wyoming County, and you go to Beckley, it's the smelly place.
It's the sulfur. It's smell, right? It's the little town that smells like sulfur, and it always did.
It's a little straight stretch.
And these were deep mines back in the day. The Mabin coal tipple was there. The Mabin lumber yard, sawmill. I tell stories about my family working in that community in the video that you'll see here in a second. And Lindsay hadn't heard this story because I'd never shared it. It wasn't.
I had no clue. She took me there and was like, "Oh yeah, this is my family's place." I'm like, "I know this place."
Yeah.
I drove by this place every single week. I mean, if you're from Pineville or Mullins, you go to Beckley, right? Everybody knows you go to Beckley, shopping, movies, whatever. So I watched them take this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yep. My grandparents had a house there. My great-grandmother had another little house right up the creek on the other side of the creek. She was the one who had, opium poppies in her front yard because the morphia that they used as medicine back in the day came from the milk of the poppy. It wasn't it, like I said before, it could be abused, but this was medicine here, you know. So that's what I remember. Like, this is old school mountain people who survived. But this was also a time when there were passenger trains that ran between Beckley and Mullins and right through Hotchkiss. And so to remember that it was actually maybe slightly more connected and advanced in that respect. That
it was probably a little bustling community right there, because it's a little straight stretch. There's a little church. There's a nice little, you know, wide space for people to build, you know. So I bet it probably was.
And we spent every Christmas Eve down there with my grandparents. My dad worked out of state a lot, and he was home on the weekends, but he would make sure we went down and visited with my grandparents as much as we could. And I loved Hotchkiss. There was a creek right through the home place that we caught crawdads in, played in for hours. My cousins and I, probably a dozen cousins, we played Red Rover for hours, and you know, we had a big yard there. And as you'll see in this video, in the late 90s, that changed when the coal company came in and needed to put a mine vent there for an underground mine.
The Hotchkiss. This piece of property actually is in front of the piece of property that my grandparents owned, that was handed down to them from their ancestors who got it as a land grant. So if you were brave enough in the early days to come west and settle, the government gave you land. And if you survived, you got to keep it and hand it down. But survival was not guaranteed. If you can imagine these mountains back when there were no roads and there were no power lines or anything, this was an incredibly rugged area, right? That's why some of the toughest people in the world come from this place, right? It takes some fortitude to live here. So my family's ancestors got this land through a land grant, and it was handed down generationally. It's a 300-acre farm, functioning farm. You grew your grain to feed your horse so that you had a way to get to places where you needed to be, right? You had your chickens. This entire valley, similar to places we've been all weekend, large population of people living down here, deep mining. But this wasn't a mine. This was a community. The mine was down the road. My great-grandfather worked at the Mabin lumber yard, the sawmill. And they told him that he could have any lumber or any boards that he could carry on his back from Mabin upstream. His house, I'll point it out, or I'll describe it, and you may be able to see it, is about halfway between here and Mabin. Anything he could carry on his back, he could have. So my great-grandfather built a house out of the lumber that he carried on his back home every single day. So that's the type of dedication that people had here. You didn't just order your lumber and it come and, you know, and he didn't have money. So that was a huge gift. I bet he carried as much as he could every single day out of there to make that house happen, right? So that's a couple generations that I met. I tell the story about my great-grandfather being the biggest man I'd ever seen, because he was like 6'7" or something like that. And when he was an elderly bachelor, he had like one big chair in the room and like one table. It was like a bachelor pad, right? And my dad took me down there. I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And I went in and I walked into this room, and I just remember this man standing up in front of me and me just being like, you know, and he looked down at me and said, "Well, that's a fine looking boy." And I said, "I'm a girl." And he said, "I guess you are, aren't you?" That's the only memory I have of my great-grandfather, but that's a pretty darn good one. So in the 90s, as you've heard what's happened, right? Like the late 80s is when the non-union mines moved in. Lots of conflict, lots of striking, lots of, you know, strife in these communities. But the non-union mines took hold. And as a result, mining expanded. It was probably 98. We found out that they were going to take our land. They just said, "We need it because the country needs coal. So it's ours. What would you like for it?" So knowing the history and knowing how screwed people have been historically, we're smarter than that, right? So what they did is they worked out a land trade. And as we leave Hotchkiss, which again is like literally we can see the end of town from here, you'll see how
It's this straight stretch.
it's this straight stretch right here. As you leave Hotchkiss, you'll see a big blue double wide trailer with a big pretty yard and another little white house beside it, the last two houses on the way out of town. That's where they moved, which in some ways was really a blessing. Remember I told you they'd been members of this church their whole life. When my dad was a little boy, that's the church building over there with the steeple, the green roof behind the trees there. When my dad was a little boy, he'd come off the farm up on the holler and start the fire in the church building at 5 or 6 in the morning to get it warmed up so that it was ready for people to come in. I don't know what to say next. I've never told this story, right? So I knew a little bit about stuff at that moment, but this happened simultaneously with me kind of colliding with Larry Gibson and learning about other stuff, right? And this was a deep mine. So they were putting a mine there, but they weren't taking the mountain away, right? So I believe why I haven't spoken about this is because I packed it up and put it away, because it was really painful for me to think about this and talk about this as I was learning about these other things. And just out of habit, I never talked about it, right? But so as a kid growing up, I live about probably 45 minutes from here, right? We would come down a lot to visit with my grandparents. My dad was only home on the weekends. He was a traveling NTL Boilermaker, which means he traveled for work, right? He went to nuclear plants and sanitary sewage plants in the big cities and worked on those projects. And when he would come home on the weekends, he would try to bring us down to visit with our grandparents. And every Christmas Eve, the entire family got together down here at my grandmother's house from the time we were little kids. And I had, a dozen or more cousins and, a dozen aunts and uncles. And we all piled in down here and we played in this creek and we played Red Rover till we were black and blue, right? Like we ran like hellions down here. This was Grandma's house, right? So the first time I came back after they'd put the mine in, I was in college and it was Christmas and we were doing the first Christmas Eve down at the new house. And I was seeing a guy that I've been seeing for a while, and he and I rode up together and he was driving. And as soon as he came into Hotchkiss and I looked over and I saw what you see now, I lost it. I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. And I made him drive to Maven past my grandmother's house so that I could compose myself before I went in. Because my family comes from this as far back as you can remember, right? So this isn't strange. This isn't odd, right? It's a fact of life. So for the people in that house, however they were dealing with it, I was dealing with it much differently and in a much different way because I felt differently about it. So I couldn't find solace there, is the point of that. Like there wasn't a comforting place that I could go there and emote what I was feeling. So I had to go do it somewhere else. And I knew that, and I didn't want to bring that energy into a Christmas celebration, right? And I think that was probably the day I put it away and was just like, I'm not going to deal with all of it simultaneously, and it's not directly impacting me, right? It is tangentially impacting me, but it's not a direct impact. So this went in. It's not changed a whole lot, but they put the deep mine in. This was, remember I said it went in 1999, 2000. In 2001, they had this mine full of mining equipment down in the pits, the miners, all that stuff, and it flooded. They didn't move the equipment out, and they flooded all that equipment in that mine when that big flood came through in 2001. So they just shut it down and stopped mining out of it. And so they weren't going to go clean it up. So all that shit's there. About 10 years ago, they applied for a mountaintop removal permit to go back in and take it from the top.
And my dad watches the papers because he reads the newspapers. My dad does not have a cell phone, smartphone, or anything like that. And he watches the permit list, right? And we've been talking about these permits. Okay, no, there were 2 floods, right, Lindsay? There was one flood in like 99 or 2000. There was another one in 2001. 2003.
Yeah.
Was there? It was a 2003.
Because we lost electricity around just south of Baltimore.
Okay.
It was a hell of Virginia Tech.
Because there were 2 storms. What happened? The first one flooded all the mine equipment. Then they went to timber to do the mountaintop removal. And after they timbered, the 2001 flood happened, or vice versa. So both times they got flooded out of the operation, right?
Tell them something.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that should tell them something.
That should tell them something, right? So the things that I wish I had gone all the way up there. One Christmas, my cousin, who was about the same age as me, you know, we went out in the woods to walk around, and we decided we were going to hike up to the old home place, and we realized that they were probably starting dinner before we got up there. So we came back down. So I never went up to the old farm place. And a part of me is kind of glad I didn't. You know, I don't have something in like tangible to miss, right? It's more of an idea of what was there. There are places in these mountains that have been inhabited by people for tens of thousands of years. The artifacts tell you that. On this land was a place called Graves Fork, where my dad said as kids, it was in front of a big cave, not a deep cave, but a big cave opening where obviously people had utilized the space. And he said you could just dig down a couple inches and find tools and artifacts and arrowheads and stuff like that. If you went to excavate, and you could probably find all kinds of stuff. It's in a valley fill now. It's plowed over or moved over. Y'all have heard me talking about morel mushrooms all weekend. My sister sent a picture to Lindsay. My sister found the first morel today. Yep. She's on my mountain at my house, which means they're probably there. There was a place in these woods under a tree where the morels grew like a carpet, like a golden carpet in the springtime. And when they went to harvest the morels, they just picked around the edges because you could walk out with buckets full of them. That's how old these ecosystems were, how established and old. The ginseng that has come out of these mountains. You know, my grandfather was a ginsenger. My Uncle Eddie is a ginsenger. It's a form of income. It's a foraging income here. The mushrooms back in the day before COVID, and I don't know if they still buy them from people, but before COVID, you could sell a pound of morels to the Char, the fancy restaurant in Beckley, for $50 a pound. If you have a golden carpet patch, it's a pretty good paycheck every spring. The wealth that exists in these mountains without extracting the coal is immense. Imagine the first white people that set foot here and saw trees as big around as this building. Go look at some of the old timber photos from Appalachia when the first people came here and started timbering the trees. And they have pictures of 12 men lined up across the base of a tree that they just cut down because the trees were like the sequoias. Lindsay and I have a weird thing that we do, and we go into places and imagine what it looked like all these years ago. And we've never done it together, but I do it. And I know she does it. And we've talked about it, but we've never done it together. But to just sit in the woods and imagine, untouched, 1,000 years ago, what this forest looked like. So, my dad, I'm glad he's not here because I wasn't going to tell this story if he was here. It's Saturday. I went to talk to my grandmother one time. I was visiting with her, and she was telling me that when they'd moved and they got settled in down there and they finally were getting ready to close off access to this land, that my dad came down one morning really, really early, and he parked down there at the new house, and he walked up on the mountain, and he stayed gone all day. And at dark, he came out of the mountain, and he was covered in mud from head to toe, she said, and he just got in his truck and he left. And I told her, I said, well, if somebody told me my mountain was going away and I was never going to see it again, I would go love it as much and as hard as I could while I had it. And I bet that's what he spent the day doing. And she said, I bet you're right. I would go to all of the places that I loved and say goodbye. Can you imagine doing that to a place that's the earth? This is our home, it's the earth, and you have to say goodbye to it. I gave you a couple of you an idea of like where the house was and stuff when we came up. The shale bank that there's a hole kind of in it was like a place to play when we were kids, right? Like some of these old homesteads have small coal mines where the seam of coal pops out in the backyard, right? And they go and chunk it out to put in their stove. They had their own coal mines, and sometimes they go many feet back into the bank because they used that resource. That is not what that is, but the doghouse for the house sat right beside it, and the house was about 50 feet away. So it was right there. So I appreciate you letting me tell this story and working it out for the first time. It's not a long story because I don't remember a lot of the details.
I gotcha.
So that was a very emotional experience. It was the first time I told that story, and it was hard to articulate because I speak quite a bit, but I speak about things that I've talked about a lot. So to speak about things that are personal to me is not really comfortable, but it was necessary, and I don't plan to make that part of my regular tour.
Well, I was going to say that it wasn't a part of the tour to begin with. Like, it was not on Kimmy's spreadsheet.
No, we had a different county. We had a different day planned altogether. But when I took you there after our podcast with Rusty, it's when we were on our way back from Charleston, and I stopped there, and you were like, why have I not heard this from you? Why have you not shared this story with me? And I couldn't answer you. I had no answer for you. I was like, I don't know. And I told you that night, I really thought about it, and I slept on it, and the next morning I woke up and I started trying to tell it. And every time I'd start to tell it, I'd break into tears. And I called you I
was afraid I wrecked you. I was like, oh my God, I broke her. Tom, I broke Elise.
I called you at 5:30 that morning. I was like, the reason I never told it is because it hurts. It's really hard to tell.
I bet it is, because when you say, this is the creek that I caught crawdads. This creek right here is the creek that I caught crawdads. Generations of my family has played in this creek. I have cousins that have told me, when I pass, spread my ashes in this creek.
Right.
Now imagine they take it away.
It's gone.
You'll never see it again.
And in my mind, I say this in the video, it was all happening at the same time that I was coming into this activism with Larry. And so I just boxed it up and put it over here. And I wasn't telling my story. I was out there fighting for other people and telling other people's stories and fighting for the mountains, right? But I'm glad that I shared this particular story with this particular group, because as we've discussed before, this was a special group of people, and it felt comfortable to be vulnerable with them, and it felt really honest. And I'll be honest in this moment and say that when I finished telling it, I kind of stood there for a minute and was like, well, that was anticlimactic.
You're like, I'm done.
That's all I got to say about that.
Okay, yay.
I was like, and what's next?
And then I think you disappeared for a little bit and got some ramps, and was like, I found ramps.
Yeah, I dug there was a little patch of ramps coming up there. So my family retained about 2 acres.
Yeah, we should clarify that.
Yeah.
So, we weren't on the coal company land.
No, we actually went, there's a church pavilion and what we call Walter's Garden spot that the 2 acres that the family kept that the mine didn't need, and we retained it. I hold it in trust as a trustee for the benefit of my aunts and uncles, and it's there forever until all of them decide, along with me, to do something different with it. But it's a great little spot.
It's cute.
There's a garden there.
Besides the nasty mine behind it. But I mean, it's a nice little spot.
But Lindsay, you were so funny. You're like, you own land adjacent to an active mine and you've never gone there or looked at it or
you haven't even told me about this
on it. And I'm like, oh yeah, no. So we also learned when they were taking pictures and flying the drone around there, you're not allowed to fly over active strip mines in the state of West Virginia, but this isn't an active strip mine. They did apply for strip mining permits back in the day, probably 15 years ago. And that, quite frankly, was the last we really heard about it. And we just all assumed, because they timbered it, that they'd stripped it. And when I say strip mine, I mean mountaintop removal. That's the only type of strip mining that really happens that I'm aware of. Now, if someone knows of a different type of strip mining that's current in West Virginia, please let us know. But what we saw was they hadn't stripped it. It's still intact. And that was, I was resistant, I think, to knowing that. Everybody's like, have you seen what's behind the big sheet that's fallen down? Have you seen what's behind the big curtain?
You can kind of see it.
Yeah, but no, because I hadn't really looked or wanted to. But it's really important to know that it's still there. Mm-hmm. And I think my sister, when I told her, she asked if I'd told my dad, and I haven't told my dad yet. You'll hear in the video about my dad and his relationship to that place from my perspective. But the story is not unusual. It's not uncommon. Mm-mm. And the imposter syndrome we talk about is like, how could I possibly stand here and talk about something that I don't really know about?
Oh, wait a minute. They took your land.
Oh, wait. I know intimately about this issue.
And that's what people say about me. It's like, how do you know? I'm sorry. My dad is dying of black lung. My grandfather was crushed in the coal mine. His name is in a memorial. My roots run deep in Appalachia. So I think I have a little bit of credibility when it comes to talking about this. Do I act like I know the answers? I don't have the answers, but I am willing to talk to somebody about what could the answers be. And people are like, if you think you're going to go back to the union, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, maybe the union needs a little bit of reworking. I'm not saying we go back to what this was or back to that. I don't want to go back.
You know what an answer to entitlement programs is? Union pensions.
Yep.
You want to know what an answer to keep people off of Social Security and welfare programs is? Prevailing wages. Yeah. It's not hard. It's been brainwashed out of us to understand the value and the need for a union. That's all right. We know. We're willing to talk about it and bring it back. And
that's totally fine, because I can see where it, and I might not know every little detail, because look, I can barely remember people's names. Okay. So I heard, I get it. But, I know how things are. I'm not an idiot.
Right. And there's, the people who can get online and talk. By God, if they can get online and talk, we can get online and talk too.
Well, there's one on Facebook that's hilarious. When the election happened, my thing was, here's what we're going to do. We're going to find one white man to annoy for 2025 and one black woman to uplift, right? So the white man that I'm annoying is Brian Helton.
Tag it.
And so I'm just, I just felt like giving him some shit on Facebook. And he's got this little bootlicker that really likes to think he's owning some libs. And his favorite term for me was dumb fuck. DUMFUK.
So cryptic.
Told me I did nothing but sit on my ass. As I was resting because I had just went on a whole weekend giving people a tour from 5 states. But I was like, okay, bro, that's cool. That's cool. It's just, it's hilarious.
Well, in the comments, like Junior about, they look at Junior and heard what Junior had to say up there. And somebody made a comment about, yeah, when the drugs go away, people start, waking up or something to that effect. And, all of these stereotypes are playing out in these conversations.
They really are.
And the whole election one about, well, they keep voting, you keep voting for red, you keep voting for red. God. And the reality is that, as I've said before, a small fraction of our state actually vote, and only a portion of them. I mean, there are Democrats that, the votes are there. Mm-hmm. But when you consider transportation issues, childcare issues, healthcare issues, all of the very legitimate issues that make mobility in these places incredibly difficult. And when people from all over say, well, if you keep voting red, what are you going to get? It disheartens people. Their vote doesn't count. Kayla, what's Kayla's last name? Now I'm drawing a blank.
Kayla Young?
Kayla Young. I am fangirling over Kayla Young because she has a TikTok. She's a representative for the 51st district. I want to say 51st district of West Virginia.
You're lucky I remembered her name.
Yeah, you did. You remembered it.
I did.
She mentioned that, she had her seat and they gerrymandered her district and she won by less than 100 votes. Mm-hmm. And she's like, if you don't think your vote matters very, very much.
Especially in the local elections. And people only think that like the only election that matters is the president. And really,
in the grand scheme of things.
And the president doesn't have all the power that people like to think that they do, because we have checks and balances for a reason. But I'm not a political science person. Like I said, I don't have all the answers. I'm fucking mad as hell, man.
Right. But I think that if more people voted and more people were engaged in a way that it was meaningful, that it would be a very different outcome.
It would.
And we're actually, I'm not aware of any local. I'm going to stop there because I'm not going to go down the political road tonight. I'm just not going to do it. I do want to do it.
Let's talk about something else.
Let's talk about something else.
Something else. What are we going to talk about?
So let's finish the wrap up of the day. So from Hotchkiss.
Well, okay. So Kimmy kept wanting to go to a company store.
Yeah.
And I was like, there, because she wanted to go to Whipple. Whipple was kind of out of the way, but I was like, we can go to Itman. You can't really go in it, but some people did. It's open.
The Itman company store is
beautiful.
It's breathtaking.
It's
is. Italian stonework. Mm-hmm. Italian immigrants came over here. A lot of the stone walls and stone buildings you see that were built in the 1800s and early 1900s were Italian immigrants that came over here. And if you go to Italy, you can tell the style of building.
Which you are Italian.
I am Italian. I've spent some time in Italy and wandering around looking at buildings. So it's spectacular.
It is.
And going there is hard. It's hard to put in context, and I think I'm glad we did it kind of towards the end of the trip, because we talked about the coal company store,
right?
Kind of the culture.
Right, and how it worked, and how the script and everything came out of the company store.
And I do feel like I'm always compelled to share this part of the story, because in the years of doing this work, I've heard a lot of different perspectives on this. And one perspective I heard at the Whipple company store by the lady, Joyce, I don't remember her last name, but she had it there for a while and did tours. She talked about the fact that some of the immigrants that came here, the company coal towns were huge upgrades from where they came from. That they came from such abject poverty that to have a house and a food supply that was consistent and secure, and didn't matter how you paid for it, you went and worked and you got food. That was paradise.
Right. They felt they were taken care of.
Absolutely. So I really think it's important, once again, just in that sense of honoring all sides of the conversation that not everybody felt oppressed because where they came from was so awful.
Well, and then also you have the black miners, because the coal towns were segregated. If you go to Nuttleburg, we need to go to Nuttleburg.
We need to go to Nuttleburg,
because as you go to Nuttleburg, you'll see it'll have what I think it called the colored section, and then you drive on, and then you get into the town, because of course the colored section was a little farther away.
You see that in cemeteries too. You have segregated cemeteries in all of these counties.
Yeah, and so when you think about where they came from, I'm sure having a home and, a place where food and,
a steady source of food that you didn't have to go kill, that was right there. I mean, to some people that was a big improvement. So I just feel compelled to name that and honor that history too, that but over time, human rights are human rights, and the arc of, what does Martin Luther King Jr. say, the arc of justice is long. We need to pull that up because I don't want to get it wrong. But you seem to have skipped your part of this day.
What are you talking about?
You went right from Hotchkiss to Itman.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And I'm pretty sure you got to drive through Mullins to get there.
Well, so I kept wondering if we were going to go to the Itman Company store first,
and then
because I was supposed
through.
to meet Tom and Rick.
Right.
So Tom and Rick, my son and husband, met us at the Miners Memorial, and then they followed us the rest of the way to your house until they left later that evening. So they got to hang out at the end. Everybody got to meet Ricky. Tom got to meet everybody. And he was like, I was just sad I didn't get to be around the whole time. And I will have to say, let's just finish this company store. Tom did the talking. He talked to, and he was like, y'all didn't film any of that. I said,
just
Tom,
for the record,
I was
we weren't
exhausted.
trespassing either. I told people, you're not allowed to go. I don't have permission to give you permission to go anywhere here. So I'm going to stand on this side of the road, and this is where I will be, because there it is.
There you go.
But Tom had felt a little more comfortable, and people do, walk around and take a look at it because it is just inspiring.
Tom, okay, so that company store has been for sale for how long? Years? And they wanted, $2 million? And then I think they went to $1 million. Well, someone finally bought it from Texas. And when they bought it, they needed a drone shot of it, and Tom did the drone shot of it. So he's like, I know the owner. He'll be fine. Okay. But we went on the sidewalk, and he told them about the company store, and people just looked around, and then we left.
They ended to a raucous round of applause and cheering when your husband stopped speaking. So I'm not entirely sure. And Tom said he's not entirely sure because I don't think anybody did record it. Max might have some footage of it.
Max recorded it because he told Tom to re-say something, and he's like, man, he restarted like a pro. And I was like,
yeah, we're not that good. He is a pro.
Yeah, he
Tom
is a pro.
Reiser
We
is a
are not
professional.
pros, Max. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not a pro.
I get on my soapbox and I get wound up and I say something, and then somebody's like, could you say that again? And I'm like, I don't know what I said.
What'd I say? And I was telling Tom just a little bit ago, I was like, I'll rant and rave on something, and somebody be like, what you said was wrong. I was like, what'd I say?
I don't
What?
remember.
You're gonna have to specify what's wrong. I don't know. I was supposed to look up something, and I forgot what it was.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote about the arc of justice.
Okay.
Because again, my brain is tired and I can't memorize quotes, but it's about
arc, A-R
C-H.
Arc of justice. Okay, is this right? The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice?
Yes. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
I got you.
And so when you're young, you don't have enough history to understand that. When you gain some history and you have a couple decades of being aware under your belt,
some perspective,
that quote in places like this, and you think about where that quote's coming from, the oppression of that community for hundreds of years. Those types of things, and helping people understand that there is no immediate solution. There is no, shut it down, slap it down, fix it this way. This arc and this transition and this next iteration of whatever West Virginia is going to be long, and it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be right. It's going to be what it is, what we need to be moving forward. And I love this place so much that every person here who's built a life here, is as valuable as every other piece of this land and this place.
Yeah.
So I get tense when people talk to us about this podcast, because we do kind of poke on those tender spots, but I also feel the love there, that like I see you and I hear you.
Or an understanding.
Yeah. I don't really like it and it makes me uncomfortable, but
I can't really say
right
much about it, but I see you.
I see you. Right.
Right.
So, you skipped Mullins.
So, I already told the story.
So I do want to say about this description. You described an accident report.
I did.
And I think that for folks like me, that's a written description of how something happened. To have that in any situation is incredible, because it provides details that your mind is making up, right? Otherwise. You also had a picture.
A drawing.
Yeah, a drawing.
Where they had a little X that marked the spot of the victim, which was my grandfather.
I think for me, that was the most impactful thing of what you showed me.
It was for me too.
And the narrative description of how this event happened, and then how you turn in this video that you'll see of you, how you presented that was obviously the first time you'd done it.
It was the first time I'd done it.
You'd never,
and I had no idea what I was doing.
Or what you were going to say, or how you were going to say it. No. But the way you presented it was artful. And that it built that tension of like, can you imagine knowing that your roof of your mind is fallen?
Well, I was imagining.
Yeah.
Because I was imagining my grandfather going, that roof's fallen and it's not good. And we need to hold back.
With all that experience, right?
With all that experience, and he had these men that he was accounted for. He was the boss. Mm-hmm. He was the boss. He wasn't supposed to be there that day, but shit was happening. And when shit's happening and you're the boss, you got to be there.
Yep.
And my grandmother told him, don't go. Please don't go. Harold, please don't go. And he said, I got to go. What else am I going to do?
I'm the boss.
I'm the boss. I got to go and take care of this. Somebody's going to die.
We work. We take responsibility.
We go in the face of danger. My father did the same thing. Somebody shot a man right beside of him that he was standing next to. As he walked away, someone shot him, and then he goes running to the man that shot.
That's right.
Running into the danger. And so that's what he did. And I was just imagining him thinking, that's not good, and we'll sit back. And the accident report said they waited 5 minutes.
Between the last fall that they heard.
Yeah, they said the rock was working is what, the wording that they used. They were like, the rock was working is the, and I can read it. I have it here. I can find it. And said the rock was working. And so they decided to stand back for 5 minutes while the rock worked. And then when they thought it was safe, they went in, because there was a piece of equipment that was stuck, and they said in some soft bottom, so it was like stuck in the mud, and they were trying to get it out. Yeah. And the thing that got me was, the whole accident report stated first who my grandfather was, right? Who he was, how many kids he had, where he was from, how many years experience he had, all of that. And then the reason why he was in there, and then what had happened, and then what could we do to prevent this again? Mm-hmm. And so when I read this several times, because I was like, I'm going to have to tell this, and I'm trying to understand what this means. And I had less than 24 hours because I had found this at dinner the night before, and this was about lunchtime, a little after, afternoon, right? So, I was just trying to figure out what it said, and I was like, what is this saying? And come to find out, let me find it. Just let me, because, and I had to ask people, and I think I'm sure I asked you as well, and I know I asked Tom, it's like, what does this mean? What does it mean? And I take so many pictures. Oh, well, I can find it on that Facebook page. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
We'll edit this part out. Is everything still rolling? Okay.
We're 101.
Yeah, we are. We're doing good.
We're doing great.
Okay, Smith family. Okay, here it is.
And we'll take a break after we get done with this.
Yeah. Harold Ernest Smith, section foreman, was killed instantly by a roof fall. 9:40 p.m., January 11th, 1967. The West Virginia Department of Mines was immediately notified, and an investigation was made the following day. Mr. Smith was 53 years of age, had 35 years of mining experience. The last year and 4 months having been at the Pocahontas Fuel Company, he survived by his widow and 7 dependent children. Mr. Smith was in the act of preparing to block a miner cat. The miner cat had stuck into some soft bottom. When the main roof of the nearby pillared area began to work or settle, Mr. Smith and the miner crew, being concerned about the roof working, went to a safe area where they remained for about 5 minutes until the roof apparently had stopped working, meaning it stopped falling. Mr. Smith and the miner crew returned to the miner and was in the act of blocking the cat when Mr. Smith apparently heard the roof break and started to run. Mr. Smith was caught underneath the falling roof rock approximately 15 feet out by the miner head, killing him instantly. Conclusion: Mr. Smith's death was caused by crushing injuries when caught underneath falling rock. The places were driven 16 to 18 feet wide, and the roof supported at various locations with one row of posts set at 5 to 6 foot centers, and spot bolting had been conducted at various locations. However, an adopted roof support plan for this system of mining had not been adopted, and roof supports were installed at the discretion of the foreman and the workmen. Recommendations: when pillar falls are being encountered, that all entrances to the fall areas be dangered off. That the roof in all areas required to be examined shall be adequately supported, and breaker posts be set to prevent an override from pillar falls. Number 3, that consideration be given to the revision of minimum timbering and or other roof support plans. So what I gathered from this is that they were trying to minimize their use of timber, meaning the timbers were used to support the roof. So if you were only doing one side, it seemed like they were doing 5 to 6 foot, and then on this side it was 15 foot. And so you don't have as much support, the rock's going to fall. And I'm glad that they make a consideration after my grandfather was crushed. So,
how many men died that day?
Just him.
He was the only one.
He was the only one.
And this was in 1976.
67.
67.
67. So, my
Do
grandmother.
you think that this prompted them to change safety measures, or you just think that it was part of the report? And
it was part of the report, and I'm sure that after that they put a few extra timbers in.
It waived liability. It said it was the discretion of the mine operator.
Yeah, the timbers were at the discretion of the foreman and the operator, so they blamed my grandfather's death on him.
and you had to put timbers up as you got the coal out to keep the roof from falling in, right? Well, apparently, as I found out in this piece of paper, that the company, they were trying to conserve the amount of timbers they were using. So on one side, they were doing timbers every 5 to 6 feet, making sure it's shored up every 5 to 6 feet. And then on the other side, and in the drawing, it shows these timbers are very close together. And then they went wide on this side every 15 foot. So they took out one timber for every other one they put in. So they were going every 5, they were going every 15 now. And so when him and his other, I guess, employees, miners went in with him, they heard the rock falling, and they went to safety, and they listened for it falling for 5 minutes. So imagine you're going in there, you know rock is falling, you know this piece of equipment is not working, and you're trying to conserve on timbers. And my grandfather has 35 mining years, 35 years of experience. So he knows that rock is not good. We're going to fall, we're going to set, and we're going to wait. We're going to listen for it fall. Can you imagine? Crash, 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 crash. 5 minutes. You wait. I think it's okay to go in. Let's go see. And they go back in, and they're trying to get it, and they start to hear the rock fall, and my grandfather runs 15 foot, and the rock falls on him and crushes him instantly. And they said, the man that got him out, our families were very, very close. And he said when he pulled him out, he was unrecognizable. I never knew him. My mother was 12. My grandmother had 7 other children at home. Her husband is dead. There's no one else to work in the mines. What do we do? So she did the only thing she knew she could do was marry a man. And because she married that man, my mother felt the need to find the first man that said he loved her, to marry him and get out of that house. So she jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, had 2 babies by this man that would barely work. He'd get enough money, he'd work long enough for 1 paycheck. He'd run around on her. She finally got tired of it. And her mom was real sick with ovarian cancer because she just let herself go. She knew she was sick, but when my pawpaw died, that was her life. She didn't want to live anymore. And so she didn't try. She didn't fight. And it's okay though, because I understand why she didn't fight. It's okay. It's all right. So the day that she died, and the day that they buried my grandmother, the man that she married burned their house to the ground so they wouldn't get it. And that's what kind of man she had to marry, because she had no other choice. She couldn't leave him, and she decided to let cancer take her. My mom was second to the youngest, so there was another child that was younger than her. She found the love of her life, and she did great. But there was a couple of the other daughters that found the shittiest men in the world until they finally found the good ones. And they have the good ones now, but That's the story of my family and of how, where is he?
Harold.
Harold Ernest Smith perished just a few miles down the road. That's my family. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you. Let me process that because I'm.
You gotta cry it out.
Thank you. Thanks. I know I was like snot, you know. There's my family.
Is basically what I read from this.
Right. And there's an illustration.
There is. And it shows how close he was to surviving.
That's what you first said when you said that. You said, look at how close he came.
He almost made it. Yeah. He almost made it.
And you said, too, you pointed out and highlighted a couple times his experience. You know, this was not this man knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah.
This man was an expert. There's a reason he was the fire boss.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason he was the man that they called in, because he knew what he was doing.
He was a problem solver. Wonder where I get it from. But I felt, and I don't want to get all crazy spiritual, you know, but I feel spiritual. And this is another thing that I want to talk about. So let me just talk. I want to talk, and I think we need to go in depth on this, because I know that I can't remember who it was. It might have been Rusty. You were like, we need to talk about religious trauma.
Mm-hmm. And it was Rusty.
I think it was. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to talk about it because I have, with it being Easter weekend, and I kind of went off on people. People say that I was mocking their religion because I called them witches because...
they're celebrating Ostera traditions.
Because Easter falls on... it doesn't fall on the same day every year because we follow the
full moon.
The moon, right? A celestial, whatever. You know, and then I have taken communion, you know, where you put the bread and the blood. I mean, and then you say prayers and you make sacrifices.
All the ritual practices of religion.
Yeah, there's no difference in my opinion. And, you know, just because you get offended because that's what you believe, sorry, but not sorry. Because my whole life, I have felt that I need to bow down and pretend like I believe the way everybody else believes, even though I had so many questions. And when I would ask questions, I'd just get, you need to have faith. You need to believe. It is what it is. Stop asking questions, kid. You're one of those mouthy ones, aren't you? You know, like I would get lashback or whatever, you know, I would get people just talking shit. And so I put I made a whole video of me talking about, look, if you think that I'm being mean because of your religion, but yet you're going to be silent when you know people are dying around here, I got nothing for you. It doesn't matter what you believe. Mm-hmm. You can't tell me that I'm going to go to hell when I'm trying to save people. Like, not save their soul, save their lives. You know? Mm-hmm. And then I just feel like it's all about interpretation. And if I don't interpret it the same way you do, that's fine. But don't come at me and tell you that I have a demon in me. I had someone tell me I had a demon in me. Do you think I have a demon in me?
I wasn't expecting that question. Of all the places you could have gone with that question.
You never know what's going to happen.
I'm sitting here thinking through my own religious trauma and kind of my experience of, as I've said, jumping through every hoop that anybody's ever put in front of me to make them feel better about my salvation.
Right. It's like I have to prove to you that I'm good enough for someone else.
What it is. And
that was a rhetorical question.
Of course it is, because I would never answer that. I think that that's all very subjective. And I also think that
I'm sorry.
As humans, we want to fit in.
Understandable.
We want to have a community.
Of course.
And as children, we're particularly impressionable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from my own personal experiences, if you're not part of a church, you don't have a community here, right? You can go to school and you can do this and do that, but where do you go to church? And when I moved back from Colorado, somebody mentioned that to me. They were like, boy, you're going to have a hard time answering that question, aren't you? And, just as a background, I actually married a person who was studying to be a Baptist minister. So I was going to be a preacher's wife.
You were. And then you grew up Catholic.
I was raised Catholic. I was christened in the Catholic Church as a baby per my Italian grandmother's wishes, right? She didn't care if we moved. They brought us to West Virginia to live, but we had to be christened, which happens as an infant. Mm-hmm. But then as I grew up in an evangelical dominated community, I tried to be part of the Baptist community. They didn't want me. Now they'll say, oh no, you don't understand. Well, I was 12, 13 years old and I understood clearly what was happening. I still understood clearly what was happening. Right. But that's okay because I never questioned my faith. I never questioned my own feelings and my own moral compass. Like there was never a, when did you find this? It's always been there, But I did grow up with people in my immediate family that when I said, who is God or what is heaven, they'd say, well, what do you think it is? And they would give me that space to think freely for myself before they gave me their interpretation.
That's awesome.
It's incredible.
Because I didn't get that.
But that breeds trouble. Free thinking and critical thought and thinking for yourself and pushing back. The whole point of religion is control.
That's what I'm saying.
And it's not to say that if you're a religious person you are controlled. Not at all. My granny had the most golden heart of anybody I've ever met in my life.
I'm not saying that anybody with religion is a bad person.
Not at all.
But when you come to me and say what you're saying makes you seem like you have a demon in you.
When you sit in judgment on me, you're counteracting everything your religion tells you to do. You should look within yourself and find out why you see a demon in me instead of the good I'm trying to do for my community.
Right.
That's how I feel about religion. Is it's a very personal thing. And I also am sensitive to the fact that in our not too long ago history, that which is published and that which isn't, destroying people who speak out and go against those things and calling them demons and portraying them as evil somehow is very useful to perpetuate oppression.
And I don't appreciate it. I
And
don't appreciate it.
But again, I think, what inside of you, I would never look at anybody and think you have a demon inside of you because a demon isn't part of my awareness.
Right.
I don't bring the demon.
Right. I don't think a demon, if someone is, an asshole, I think you're an asshole. And if you have some issues that you need to work out.
If you demonize people who disagree with you, then that's a very different thing.
Right.
But I think that I have seen the damage that religion can do. I've seen the good that non-religious people can do. And I think that is your lesson.
Yeah.
Right? Perhaps that person that you're standing in judgment in and looking down on is your golden opportunity to show your worth. And if you judge them and spit on them and walk away from them, then you've demonstrated your worth.
Yeah.
And your own soul.
Yeah.
And that's really your walk, right? I talk a lot about the decision and the battle between good and evil is fought and either won or lost every single day with what you do. It's in your hands every day how you act. And in those moments, that's what defines your character.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with any type of prescribed, to help. I am a student of Christ. I will say that. I have read the Bible. I'm a student of Christ.
Right.
It's beauty. It's love. It's compassion.
It's all about love.
It's all about upheaval of systems that oppress.
Yeah.
And if you missed that story, you should probably read it again.
Maybe read it again.
But I also feel that it's religion and people's good hearts are manipulated and used for bad things all the time.
Definitely.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person.
No.
It means you're trying to be the best person you can.
And someone is trying to use you.
But I also believe in freedom.
Yeah.
And I believe in independence. And I believe that I am free to say, feel, think, whatever I want in this country. And if you want to debate that, well then let's debate that all day long. If you really feel my fundamental freedoms shouldn't exist, then that's a different story for a different day, and that has nothing to do with religion either.
And you better plant your feet.
You better plant your feet. I get, if you study history, you know how easy it is to lose the freedoms that we have.
Very easy.
And that's why a lot of us get sensitive when we see those echoes and those things returning. You know, we've fought World War over this issue. We know where this leads, and we know it's coming. But we also know that what is happening across the world has never happened before. We've never been as connected across the world as we are right now. And one reason we're doing this podcast is to put this voice and this position out into the world and say that if you don't like what we say about religion and you want to demonize me because of it, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
But do I see a demon in you, girl? I see a rowdy redneck. You know this. I see a rabble-rousing, tree-hugging, gun-toting, plant your feet, mountain-loving mama. And if the people want to demonize that, they can demonize that.
It's, well, you know, where we here, what I grew up with was Pentecostal.
Which is a whole thing on its own.
A whole other thing. And it was, you can't even go to heaven as a lukewarm Christian.
Right. I will spit you out of my mouth.
You know, and I'm like, that don't make no sense. That makes absolutely no sense to me. What do you want me to do? And I think I said something. Somebody said, "What do you want me to do? Kiss a preacher's ass? Like, what do I got to do to get into heaven?" Right? Like I said, I've been baptized. I you know,
I've said the words. I believe.
I live the best life that I know to live.
But I'm not doing it good enough.
I'm not going to a church.
I'm not saying the right word.
I curse. I call people out on their bullshit. Oh, I thought Jesus did that. I thought Jesus called people out on their bullshit. Honestly. And I feel like they bash this into me, and now I'm like, well, you are not doing anything what you said you need to do. And here I am busting my ass, and you're calling me a demon? Go fuck off.
But shame is a very powerful tool.
It is.
Shame is the most powerful tool of religion. Is that if I can shame you into thinking that other people are looking at you and judging you, that drives you away from your community. So how many people sit in those places in exactly the same state of mind we are, playing along because other people are going to ostracize them and put them down or demonize them if they don't? That's not real religion.
No.
That's taking the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah. And to me, and what had always bothered me is because my parents never took me to church. My parents never went to church.
Get out of town.
I went. I know. I went with the aunts and uncles, right?
I went with the neighbors.
The neighbors. You know, but my mom was like, yeah, I go to church, and they believe. But my dad worked in the coal mines with preachers. Okay? And he said, if those are preachers and those are what's going to get into heaven, I don't want nothing to do with them. Because they were the dirtiest men you'll ever meet.
It's been my experience that a lot of people will use religion or a path in religion to justify
the shit that they do. And also to create that. I mean, we hold holy people and priests and preachers in such high regard that it's easy to seek that out. And then
again, we can get into a whole conversation about compensation and taxes and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is a lot of trauma has been done by religion here in these counties and across the planet. But we know personally here what we've experienced. I couldn't get married in the Baptist church to the man who was going to be a Baptist minister until I got baptized in the Baptist church. Well, he didn't get baptized because, well, I guess he didn't think he needed to jump through that hoop. But I did. I got dunked in front of the church in front of a bunch of people because other people needed to see that.
Right. It's for other people. It's a show.
Other people. It's a show. I had accepted everything that I needed to a long time before that and had come to terms with my religion, but I was told you can't do this unless you do this. So I did that.
One of those rituals.
Right. It's a ritual. Right. It's a practice. It's deeply personal for some people. The same faith and feeling and emotion that people feel in church on Sunday, I feel in the creek.
Right.
Or on the river or in the woods. I feel so close to the Creator and part of all that it is a holy and sacred
when you
experience.
Find a muggin',
it's ecstasy.
Oh my God.
Really? You talk about the ecstasy of Christ. It's the ecstasy of existence and being human and all that is human and how beautiful it is.
I gotta tell you, since we are topping off our trip with at your house, we go to your beautiful place up on top of the mountain, and there's a campfire, and I do a couple of little interviews. I wanted to get everybody on, but we just didn't have the time.
No.
But I got the most important people, and I'm gonna show Ariel's stuff. I want to make sure that Angie and Ariel's good with it. But Ariel was my girl, and that night after all that, and we were hanging out around the campfire, and everybody's just hanging out and talking. And I felt like I was floating. I felt this energy, the spirits of our ancestors, of the people there, of everything. And I felt like I was floating, and they were carrying me because they were like, you worked so hard. You did this. Let me just carry you through this night and let you just have fun. And I had a blast. And those people are just so, I'm wearing the shirt. Kimmy, I'm wearing your shirt. And I love those people so much, and I want to go see them wherever, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, wherever they are. And we have to make some clarifications.
Yeah, so
remember?
Yeah, so we needed to point out that this was not a student trip. There were not students from the University of Pittsburgh there. There were folks from Pittsburgh who live in Pittsburgh who happen to work at schools.
At the school. They were some professors, right, and they're organizers, and they work in their communities for different things. So it wasn't really a school trip, and there were people from really all over.
There were, and it was a big group. And as I said in the first part of this, finishing in a place, we've never done that before. We've never gone somewhere and just kind of unpacked it and said, wow. We've always done like a debrief and kind of how we're going to carry what we learned back into our work and back into our communities, because that's an important part of.
We have one tomorrow.
Yeah,
we have our Kimmy Zoomy,
our Zoom meeting with Kimmy on our debrief. But it was my birthday. Sunday was my birthday, and so to land there Saturday night and have we didn't have a big bonfire because it was pretty dry. We did like a nice campfire, and
yeah, it was a nice little small fire. It was perfect.
We had just great conversation and some really deep connections of, as people, honoring each other and being like, I see you and I see how excited you are about this particular thing. And wow, this is your thing that, just learning about each other as individuals. I don't plan on doing that often. I don't open my house to people generally. It was a lot, but at the same time, the next morning, I am blown away. There was almost no cleanup.
They were professionals.
Like
they knew
they knew
the assignment.
Yes, they understood the assignment without doubt. And I just want to say thank you. My place was no worse for the wear from having 35 people there, and That's incredible.
I walked in probably maybe an hour after they left.
And it was spotless.
It was.
And
a little bit of food left.
I do
Thank
want to
you
give my
guys.
husband mad credit for, I walked in and my whole upstairs was clean and my mom was standing at the sink and I said, did you clean the kitchen and everything? She's like, no, your husband did. And I was like, oh, well, that's
way to go,
awesome.
hubby.
So
he had a
thank
good
you.
time too.
Everybody, I think, had a really good time. And I think it was, I'm excited to talk tomorrow about, you know, what the next steps are and where we go with this, because it'll never look like that again. Mm-hmm. That was a once in a lifetime kind of thing that we did. It was very epic and it was deeply personal and it was recorded on a number of media. And so, but from here, what do those conversations look like? And anybody who listens to us and has ideas or has, you know, we're connecting with vendors. I can't wait to get some merch from some of our new friends.
I know.
I'm excited because there's so much creativity and so much art in our communities and artisans and artists who are very talented. So, you know, that's what this is about, is connecting those community pieces. We happen to live in a place that's got some damage and some toxicity, but we're going to stay here. We're not leaving. And so
I'm not going anywhere. I put a 30-year mortgage on this place, and this is the place I grew up on.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. Why should I move?
That's right.
You know? And I don't know. I just, you got to hang out with my dad and my mom before we came here, and I wanted to say one thing about my dad. He's not doing that well. He seems to be doing, I don't know. I'm not going to go into detail, but he is one of those, I never saw him go into a church except for a wedding or a funeral. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because he told me the things that he saw the preachers do. And in my mind, when you sit there and tell me, I can't be a lukewarm Christian and go into heaven, but you can be a preacher and be a complete asshole and do that. But this man who's never walked into a church, he's not allowed in heaven, but he would give you the shirt off his back. He'd do anything in the world for you. Anybody. That is not justice to me. And so I can't accept it. If that is what you think your God does, I don't want no part of it.
And that's the beauty of all the different religions, is that, you don't have to accept that.
I don't.
My heart says, no, that's not how I want to believe.
No.
And your dad has a hella sense of humor. Your mom and dad are both really funny, but Gable he's just wicked funny. He says just one-liner zingers that are cute.
He's usually coming after me because...
he's giving you a hard time.
He's always giving me a hard time, but...
That time with them is precious and it's beautiful outside. And so I'm glad I got to walk around for a few minutes because
it was perfect timing when you pulled up. So you got to go and see his buildings because he wants to go and check his buildings every day. He wants to go and be out there. That's his spot. So that's my daddy. And I know I talked about trying to talk to him, but I honestly don't think that's going to happen now.
And I think that's perfectly okay because he is so present with us in everything that we do. Like you said, our ancestors and everybody who walks with us here now and walks with us on the other side. It's powerful to feel. And again, the community that has reached out and said, wow, we haven't heard these stories in a long time. Nobody talks about Blair Mountain anymore. Thank you. And so I know that we're doing the right thing. And again, if you disagree with what we're saying to the point where it causes you anger or whatever, you don't have to listen to us. There are lots of people I don't listen to.
I really would like for you to give me a bad review.
Lindsay's like, I'll take the bad report
card. I'll take a bad review. Just if you got something to say, just say it out in the reviews.
So we pulled it together. We did an hour and a half.
Oh my God. How'd we do this?
Knocked it out.
Look, we got lives and I have no idea. I keep bringing on projects into my life. Like I don't have enough going on, but
Well, that's what happens when you sit on your ass all day and don't do anything. Oh.
What do you mean?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Right. Okay.
Right. Oh, because I sit on my dumb fuck ass all day. Okay. Anyway, thanks for listening.
And you do an amazing job putting this stuff together. So
Thank you.
when it happens, it happens.
It does.
And we thank everybody for listening. And keep the comments coming. Let us know what you want to hear, what you want to talk about. If you want to be part of a podcast, or
if you want to talk to us, we've had a few people reach out. We're going to try to work in some stuff. But like I said, our lives are really crazy. It's hard for us to come together. And then if we try to throw someone else in the mix, it's usually crazy. And I want to say, oh, well, after these few weeks, it'll die down. I don't think it's
never
going to
die down. That's right. Your business is just now taking off, and things are getting rolling. And
maybe
thank you.
we'll talk about that one day.
Yeah, we'll talk about all that.
I love you.
I love you too.
We will. We'll do this again another time.
We will, and maybe outside next time.
Yeah. Okay. And woo.
Appalachian Livin is sponsored in part by Wade Law Firm PLLC, Sage Stitch Finance Corporation, representing wisdom and mending what we already have, providing gap funds for resilient renovations.
Appalachian Livin is also brought to you by Hope Money Coaching, rescuing you from financial chaos and leading you to a path of financial wellness. Minimalist Gym, helping men and women navigate their health and fitness without restrictive fad diets.